There are several types of mass media that dominate not only the US but also globally the whole world. The broadcast media, such as radio, recorded music, film, and television. The print media, that includes newspapers, books, and magazines. The outdoor media, which comprises billboards, signs, pamphlets, or placards. The digital media, that includes internet, mobile mass communication, and some may even add video games to this as well. However, the main types of mass media dominating the United States of America, and ones we're going to discuss further today, are newspapers, magazines, radio, television, and also the modern forms of mass media. Starting off with press, America's first independent newspaper, the New England Courant, was published by Benjamin Franklin's older brother, James Franklin, in 1721. Nowadays, newspapers have declined in their influence and penetration into American households over the years. Their circulation steadily rose between 1940 and the mid-1980s. In 1940, there were about 41 million weekday papers and 32 million Sunday papers in circulation. 2013 was the first year where weekday circulation numbers dipped below its 1940 numbers, and 2018 is the first year that the Sunday circulation numbers fell below its 1940 levels as well. Supermarket tabloids are national weekly papers printed on newsprint in tabloid format, specializing in celebrity news, gossip, astrology, and bizarre stories about ordinary people. Supermarket tabloids are particularly notorious for the over-the-top sensationalizing of stories, the facts of which can be called into question. Most major supermarket tabloids in the US are published by American Media Incorporated, including the National Enquirer, Star, The Globe, and National Examiner. Tabloids such as The Globe and the National Enquirer often use aggressive and usually mean-spirited tactics to sell their issues. Unlike regular tabloid format newspapers, supermarket tabloids are distributed through the magazine distribution channel, similarly to other weekly magazines and mass-market paperback books. They are often found for sale alongside the checkout lines of supermarkets, hence the name. The oldest tabloid known to date is the American Daily News from 1919. If it didn't have any news, it would simply make it up and use a photograph staged by the newspaper staff, the news and editing technique called composograph, which basically we can say is old-fashioned Photoshop. A middle market newspaper is one that attempts to cater to readers who want some entertainment value from their newspaper as well as sufficient coverage of significant news events. Middle market status is the halfway point of a three-level continuum of journalistic seriousness. Upmarket newspapers generally cover hard news, and downmarket newspapers, aka tabloids, favor sensationalist stories. The best-known American middle-market papers are USA Today, the Chicago Sun-Times, and the New York Daily News. Newspapers that are actually worth the read and are quite trustworthy are the broadsheets. The influential dailies like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal are sold in most US cities. Although the New York Times' primary audience has always been the people of New York City, the Times has gradually become the dominant national newspaper of record. The Times articles are often cited by both historians and judges as evidence that a major historical event occurred on a certain date. Although the cost of publishing has increased over the years, the price of newspapers has generally remained low, forcing newspapers to rely more on advertising revenue and on articles provided by a major wire service, such as the Associated Press or Reuters, for their national and world coverage. By small chains that own a handful of newspapers, or in a situation that is increasingly rare, by individuals or families. Most general-purpose newspapers are either being printed one time a week, usually on Thursday or Friday, or are printed daily. Major cities may also support a local business journal, trade papers relating to local industries, and papers for local ethnic and social groups. Moving on to magazines. The magazine industry in America was established in 1741 in the historical city of Philadelphia. The first American magazine boom occurred between 1825 and 1850. During this period, more than 2,000 magazines were founded. The reason was literacy boom. The United States has a large magazine industry with hundreds of magazines serving almost every interest, as can be determined by glancing at any newsstand in any large American city. The US has three leading weekly news magazines: Time, Newsweek, and US News and World Report. Time and Newsweek are center-left, while US News and World Report tends to be center-right. The US also has over a dozen major political magazines, including The Atlantic and The New Yorker, among others. In entertainment, the magazines Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, America Pioneer, and LA Record are very popular. Besides the hundreds of specialized magazines that serve the diverse interests and hobbies of the American people, like Vanity Fair, Glamour, Vogue, Automobile, and the Rolling Stone, there are also dozens of magazines published by professional organizations for their members, such as Communications of the ACM for computer science specialists and the ABA Journal for lawyers. The interwar period is primarily associated with the rapid development of broadcasting. The first test broadcasting station appeared in the United States before World War I. First radio programs in the USA refer to the end of 1920s. The US does not have a federal government-owned national broadcaster. Most of people in the US listen to their local state radio stations. However, WNYC, aka W New York City, has the largest audience in the United States. It is about 1 million listeners each week. It focuses mostly on news and cultural programs. Voice of America, or also known as VOA, provides programming for broadcasts on radio, TV, and the internet outside of the US in 43 languages. It has the audience of 123 million people each week. And as an interesting fact, the Voice of America was forbidden to broadcast directly to American citizens until July 2013. The intent of the legislation was to protect the American public from propaganda actions. Radio broadcast companies have become increasingly consolidated in recent years. National Public Radio is the nation's primary public radio network, but most radio stations are commercial and profit-oriented. In 1970, the Federal Communication Commission had limited the number of radio stations one person or company could own to 1 AM and 1 FM locally, and 7 AM and 7 FM stations nationally. However, due to extensive concentration of media ownership stemming from Telecommunication Act of 1996, radio companies could own not more than 8 local stations per area market. Most stations are now owned by major radio companies such as iHeartMedia, formerly also known as Clear Channel Communications, then, for example, Cumulus Media, Town Square Media, and Entercom. A newer form of radio that is gaining popularity is satellite radio. The two biggest subscriptions-based radio services are Sirius Satellite Radio and XM Satellite Radio, which have recently merged to form Sirius XM Radio. Unlike terrestrial radio, music channels are commercial-free and other channels feature minimal commercials. Satellite radio is also not regulated by the FCC. Because of the internet radio and digital streaming services have emerged. Among popular brands are Pandora, iHeartRadio, but mainly Spotify. Digital audio broadcasting goal is to replace FM broadcasting and become the future of radio. Some industry experts are wary of this new transmission method though. Let's continue with television. In 1930, National Broadcasting Company opened experimental TV station to test out TV broadcasts. At first, NBC only broadcast for 2 hours from 7 to 9 p.m. There were no regular TV programs at the time. By the end of 1941, television was getting more popular. But only in 1948, there began the big TV boom. Television is the major mass media of the United States. The majority of households have more than one set. The major US broadcast television networks are formerly mentioned National Broadcasting Company, aka NBC, Columbia Broadcasting System, aka CBS, and American Broadcasting Company, aka ABC. Together they are sometimes called the Big Three. Another major broadcaster is the Fox Broadcasting Company, or for short just Fox. The 2019 Pew survey showed that among people who named Fox News as their main source for political and election news, 93% identify as Republicans. Meanwhile, Democrats tend to prefer the so-called Big Three or cable news network, aka the CNN. The number of hours of television an average American watches is around 4.5 hours a week. Statistics show that the number of hours spent watching television is highest for women over 55 years of age and lowest for young men between 18 and 24 years. When talking about television broadcasting, we cannot forget to mention the late night shows. They're intended for broadcast after 11 p.m. and usually through 2 a.m. Eastern and Pacific time. You may know Stephen Colbert or Seth Meyers. However, my favorite trio is James Corden with his Late Late Show on CBS, Jimmy Fallon with his Tonight Show on NBC, and Jimmy Kimmel with his late night show, Jimmy Kimmel Live on ABC. Public television has a far smaller role than in most other countries. However, a number of states, including West Virginia, Maryland, Kentucky, and South Carolina, among others, do have state-owned public broadcasting authorities which operate and fund all public television stations in their respective states. The income received from the government is insufficient to cover expenses, and stations also rely on corporate sponsorship and viewer contributions. DirecTV and Dish Network are the major satellite television providers with approximately 20 and 40 million customers. Meanwhile, the major cable television providers are Comcast with 22 million customers, Time Warner Cable with 11 million, and Cox Communications, Charter Communications, and Verizon FiOS with 5 to 6 million each. And finally, we're moving on to the modern forms of mass media. The internet has provided a means for newspapers and other media organizations to deliver news and keep archives public. Revenue is generated through advertising or subscription payments. Aside from web portals and search engines like Google and Yahoo, the most popular websites are YouTube, Wikipedia, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Yelp, IMDb, Reddit, Pinterest, eBay, TripAdvisor, Indeed, Healthline, Quora, Etsy, Instagram, Messenger, and of course we can't forget TikTok. Nowadays, online streaming makes it possible to watch everything from live news and sports to classic movies to modern TV favorites in their own time on any device. The Amazon Unbox and Crackle over-the-top video-on-demand streaming services launched in 2006, then Netflix and Hulu followed in 2007. CBS All Access and Tubi were unveiled in 2014 and YouTube Red in 2015. Disney Plus and Apple TV Plus launched in 2019. HBO Max and Peacock launched in 2020. New York Magazine has a vulture streaming guide to the TV shows and movies available for streaming on Netflix, Amazon, HBO, and Hulu. The term streaming wars was coined to discuss the new era of competition between video streaming services such as Netflix, Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, etc. And lastly, let's talk a bit about the freedom of the expression and objectivity. In general, the US courts have held that the press has a watchdog role over government and is not subject to prior restraint or registration. On the other hand, defamation, obscenity, and publication of national security secrets have been generally determined not eligible for protection under the First Amendment.